G'day there guys, it's your Aussie Hubby Markee, back at it again with another r/I do work here video. Now if you love me like I love you, then you know what to do. I want you to mosey on over to that old like button and tackle it like bloody Steve Irwin with his crocodiles. Maybe even chuck an Aussie flag down in the comments. Now with that said, I want you to sit back, relax, chuck a prawn on the barbie, and get ready for some bloody Idoworkherelady stories. Now our first post is by user Amraf, titled, "Shabbily dressed guy actually does work in the building, dude." So, years ago, I got a pretty sweet gig, working as security guard. Shift supervisor actually, which is important. In a building downtown. It was a mixed-use building, so we had a food court, retail stores on 2 levels, as well as 5 office towers. When I first started, one of the things all the guards are taught is to treat everybody they deal with respectfully. The building did have a lot of transients and homeless people wander through, but we prided ourselves on being courteous and polite to everyone. Well, one lazy Sunday morning, I get a frantic call from our building operator, the guy who watches all the security cameras, telling me I need to get to a specific bank of chairs on the 2nd floor. He's panicking and I can't make out much of what he's saying other than one of the guards' names. I go rushing over, worried that this guard, who's a bit of a loudmouth bully, might be in a fight or something. Oh boy, do I wish that that was the case. When I get there, the guard is berating an older gentleman who is seated in one of the chairs. Guy has a pile of papers and a coffee on a table in front of him and is pretty shabbily dressed. A pair of threadbare jeans, dirty running shoes, a faded and stretched out shirt, and a leather jacket that is more scuffed than the leather at this point. There's a ratty laptop bag on the floor leaning against the table. The guard is damn near purple in the face, screaming at this guy to get the hell out, pointing widely and yelling obscenities about how we don't allow pieces of garbage to live here. You've been here an hour, move along. I walk up, tell the guard to cool his heels. Hey guard, let's just take a breath. What's going on here? And then I greet the gentleman in the chair and ask what he seems to be the problem. The second gentleman gets 2 words out. Guard lights up on a tangent about how this homeless drug addict is loitering and needs to leave, but won't get up. I shush him and try talking to the gentleman again, and this time he got out 4 words before the guard interrupts again, and this time starts threatening to literally flip the chair forward to toss the gentleman onto the floor. I finally have enough with the guard and tell him to go to the office and cool off, and that I will deal with the gentleman. Guard begrudgingly leaves, and I apologize to the gentleman about the guard's overreaction. Gentleman basically says, I appreciate it. I work in X tower on X floor and forgot my keys. I was waiting until my assistant arrives and can let me in. I automatically offer to let the gentleman into his office. We do it all the time and have specific protocols for it. And he accepts, so away we go to the elevator. We reach his floor and then the door opens, which is when I realize where I am. Every single night we patrol every single office space of every single tower, except for one. On one floor, the entire space is occupied by a legal firm that is worth multi-millions, and we aren't allowed in that office ever. Yep, I'm standing on that floor. Gentleman steps into the floor lobby, and I have to excuse myself to go to get the key for his office. We aren't allowed to carry a copy of it, so I can let him in, and he just nods. I race down to the building operations room, snag the key, and race back as fast as I can. When I get back to the floor, I open the office door and the gentleman invites me in as he goes to shut off the alarm. I then have to awkwardly ask him for his ID and to see his office so I can verify he's allowed to be there. He chuckles and obliges me. He's the frickin' owner of the legal firm. He thanks me for letting him in and I leave. About 20 minutes later, the president of our security company arrives on site with 2 other people, and the guard who blew a gasket is escorted off-site. Fired. As soon as I left the lawyer, he called the manager of the building at home to have words, and manager then called security company who came down personally. I got a nice compliment for how I handled things, and I learned why we had the rule of treating everybody with respect. Now our next post is by user Flickin' Snorty, titled, "You look like you're 16. What makes you think you know anything about beer?" So this happened about a year and a half ago when I was a bartender at a high-end restaurant. This isn't all verbatim, but exchange is as good as I can remember it. I'd been working at this place for over a year, and had worked my way up to shift support / bar manager, and was 19. One day, I was sat up at the bar drinking with some of our regulars and a few colleagues that had the afternoon off, and a man came up to the bar to order. There was only one bartender working, as it was after the Sunday lunch rush, and it was always quiet by that point. This bartender was new, and I just handed the shift over to him. He was capable of running the shift on his own, but hadn't quite learned the drinks menu. The gent that had just walked in to order started asking about the beers in a really snobbish manner. Such as, what are your Weiss beers? Which lager is the most crisp? And do you have any really hobby lagers? Basically, he was asking questions about any type of beer possible just to be complicated and sound like he knew his stuff. No one really comes in asking those types of questions if they don't have a specific flavor profile in mind. E.g., you only typically ask about Weiss beers if you want a wheaty beer. You only ask about crisp beers if you want a refreshing lager, and only ask about hoppy lagers if you're into IPAs. Anyways, I overheard this, and offered my own guidance as the poor new recruit was looking at me like a deer in the headlights. I just ran through the menu and suggested the correct drinks for his questions, to which he just exhaled through his nose and outright said, "You're about 16, and shouldn't even be drinking here. What makes you think you know about beers?" I'm a polite person, and I'm really not a fan of unnecessary conflicts, so didn't offer any wisecracks or smugness. I just told him, "I heard you asking some pretty tough questions, and new recruit's name started last week. I thought I'd help out, as I'm off shift and it's a good training point for him as I'm his manager." To which he joked about the new starter being old enough to be my dad. I'm not sure what he was trying to gain from throwing weak insults at a stranger, but my mind switched into work mode, and I just started listing off drinks on our menu like I was advertising half the breweries in Europe. I asked what flavor profiles he was after, if he wanted a light ale or a heavy lager, high ABV or low. If he was looking to eat, then perhaps one of the wines would be better suited if a heavy beer is preferred, as the special was fish. I finished off with the new bartender's name. "Can you pop staff discount on for this gent? It'd be nice to see him back here when I'm working." Proceeded to give him my till and walk through the steps to apply it. Lo and behold, this bloke orders a pint of Carling, because all the fancy beers were way too expensive. Imagine that, trying to show off to a bartender that you know more than them, and then ordering the cheapest beer on tap. I don't miss these type of guests one bit. And our next post here is by user Only Here to Shout, titled, "Who did you say your father was?" So not quite an I do work here moment, but I don't know where else to put this. I might mess up some things, not because my native language is something else, I just suck at English. So the cast are me, store manager, co-worker, and random customer. A few years ago, I was working for my auntie in the 2 convenience stores she owns in town. It was a temporary thing that stretched 2 years. Long story on that one. And every day was the same. Punch in, work, punch out. My father was pretty well known around town for all the years he worked in automotives, as a parts store manager, mechanic, parts manager, etc. One day I was behind the counter, waiting on customers, and someone came up to the counter, and as I was scanning their items, I noticed they had a fountain drink. So I went up to ring it, and I'm interrupted. Random customer is like, "I'm a family, so I get these for free." In which, family like my aunts, nieces, and nephews, and my aunts and uncles get drinks for free from the fountain and slushy. I'm like, "Oh okay, what's your relationship to the owner?" Mind you, I know my aunties, uncles, and cousins very well, but not their kids. And consider I'm about 19 to 20 at the time, and I was one of the younger ones. So of course some cousins had kids, but the oldest wasn't even out of high school yet. He looks me dead in the eye and says, "I'm Brett, my father's youngest son." I couldn't help but sit there for a couple of minutes with a look of disbelief that he just said he was me? So I decided to have some fun with it. I look over to the store manager, my cousin. "Hey, store manager, does this look like my father's name's youngest son?" She took a moment to get a good look at him, She's like, he's my father's name's youngest son? I know, right? You know what that means. You finally have a younger brother with the same name? The random customer just sat for a moment with the most confused look on his face, mixed with a good amount of shock, not seeming to realize that the name on my name tag in big bold letters that read Brett. I looked over to my coworker. You hear that, coworker? I have a younger brother with the same name as me. Isn't that great? Oh, that's great. But he looks a bit old to be your youngest sibling. The guy looks about late 30s. I look a little older than I am, but everyone usually says 1 or 2 years older than I actually am. He's like, what are you talking about? None of us could believe this guy has not caught on yet. So I have to look him dead in the eye and tell him, nice to meet you. My name is Brett. Points to name tag. I'm my father's name's youngest son. He looks around at all of us. Clearly the random customer finally understood. So I ring up the drink, he paid and left with us still laughing. Bonus, his girlfriend came in a couple of days later and claimed to be my oldest sister, not knowing who I was. Spoiler alert, it was not my sister. Right, our next post is by Karen RN64, titled Airline Pilot. So my daughter and I were flying to visit my mother-in-law in Florida. The last leg of our journey was in a puddle jumper small enough that they even weighed our purses. We were sitting in our seats along with another woman and her 2 daughters, when a young woman in a white shirt climbed into the cockpit. The other woman leaned over, tapped her on the shoulders and said, I believe that is the pilot's seat, young lady. You will have to move. The young woman turned around and said, I am the pilot. The other woman then asked if she was old enough to fly. The pilot repeated, I am the pilot, lady. And not only was she a good pilot, but we hit a thunderstorm on the way that we barely felt. Rightio, our next post is by user Needs More Bokeh, titled, Did you come here yesterday? Hope you enjoy my first story. It's a bit long, and since English is not my first language, I guess some mistakes might be around. So, background. I'm a structural engineer, and for better or worse, I have some experience at assessing structural damage on terrain, and because of that, I was hired in late 2017 to examine damaged buildings after the earthquake in Mexico City and surroundings. My job was to go around the property, identify and document damage caused by the earthquake or aggravated by the earthquake, and then prepare a report that would be used for insurance claims and other necessities. In theory, I had certain authority to excavate a building, but luckily it was never necessary. Another thing I have to add is that I have a bit of a baby face. More like a lot of a baby face. I easily get mistaken for someone much, much younger. So here I am. I was assigned to check this particularly old factory during the day. A pretty big building of near 6,000 meters squared, one of the not so good areas of the city. I arrive roughly at 9:45, 15 minutes before the appointment, and the only entrance is this huge metal door with a smaller blue door on the corner. I go and knock the small door. No answer. Only at the 3rd attempt, someone opens. He was like a small goblin. Opens the door and looks me up and down. Security goblin's like, who are you? I'm me. I come from company for a meeting with the owner. And who sent you? Me, a bit confused. I come from company. I have an appointment with the owner. I proceed to explain to him what I was going to do and my schedule on a paper that I was carrying. And who are you? I'm confused about the goldfish-like retention capability of this guy, but I give him my name and all the information again. He huffs and says he is going to check, closes the door. 10:15 and I'm still in the entrance, waiting, and the security goblin has not appeared. At this point, I had called the central office that was coordinating all the inspections, and they were frenetically trying to see why I wasn't allowed to enter. After knocking maybe 5 or 6 times, the security goblin opens again. What do you want? I've been waiting for half an hour. Could you find the owner? Security guard looks me up and down again. Somehow my white construction helmet and blue vest with the company name were not enough to make him connect the dots. He squints his eyes and says, "And who are you?" I'm dumbfounded. It actually takes me a second to answer because I needed to be sure if I hadn't fallen into a creative punishment in purgatory. I give him my name, company name, and a brief explanation of why I had an appointment with the owner. He squints again, without a word, closes the door. By 11:15, I'm absolutely fed up and asking the central to leave. They finally answer that they had spoken to the owner and confirmed he is expecting me. At this point, I had forgotten how many times I had knocked on the door, and my patience is at the limit. Still, I'm containing myself to keep the best, most professional image I can. The security goblin opens again. He is somewhat still unimpressed that I have stood near an hour and a half in front of the door, and says, "Who are you?" I'm now convinced this is some sort of practical joke, but I'll follow. "I'm me, I come from company. And what do you need?" "I have an appointment with the owner. I understand he is waiting for me." Suddenly, his eyes opened wide and his face changed the expression of someone who has gone to the depths of his mind and returned with a revelation. "Oh, but didn't you come here yesterday?" At this point, I admit I lost it. I fully lost my cool, and with an exasperated but still not screaming tone, I snapped back. "I have been in the same place for the last hour and something. How can you be that incompetent?" It seems that was the password, because now, Security Goblin, visibly scared, let me in immediately and pointed to a door at the other side of the internal parking lot. I passed by while he was muttering, "You didn't need to scream at me," like a hurt kid. Inside, there was the owner and some other guy. Before I can even present myself, he berates me for being more than an hour late, so he cannot go with me to the inspection. I explain briefly that the guard wouldn't let me in since 9:45. Apparently this wasn't so rare because he sighed heavily and muttered, "That fat idiot." He excused himself and the other guy accompanied me. I could hear the screams of the owner at the distance while entering the second floor. By the time the check was done, no severe damages, everything was easy to repair. I found the owner again. Apparently, the security guard judged that I was too young and my accent was too weird to be who I claimed, so he didn't even ask, but instead went away and forgot twice I was there. I was 31. Rightio, and our next story is by the same OP, titled, "Shut Up Kid, I Want the Engineer." Second story. Since the first one was much more appreciated than I could have hoped, I began looking into old anecdotes, and I remembered this gem from 2011. Again, a small preemptive excuse since English is not my first language. Sadly, or luckily, I don't remember any more stories that fit this particular sub. That said, here we go. At that time I was 26, just out of university with my title and master both completed by December 2010. Almost immediately, I went into a big engineering company, specialized in tall buildings. I was still green with little to no experience in the real world, and by nature, I'm also evasive when it comes to conflict. So I'm not exactly the wise choice when it comes to clash against aggressive or too dominant people. Still, I was able to fake confidence and capable enough to quickly gain the trust of clients. Because of that, I was already managing projects with some degree of autonomy at 6 months into the job. That said, it was November, already very warm. Chile, so summer in November, and the office was working at its usual pace. That is, calm, but 2 steps away from total panic. It was morning when my boss called me. Let's call him Ray. He's a great guy, professional, but often a bit dense when it comes to social cues. To this day, we're still good friends, despite both not working there anymore. When I arrive at his desk, he pulls up a set of schematics. He's like, "Hey, I have a meeting this afternoon with this particular client, but I cannot go. They have some kind of issues, so it's important that someone from the office is there if things go difficult." "Difficult?" I asked. "Yeah, they made a frick up and want to blame us. Still, everything is on the drawings, you shouldn't have any issues." "Sure, I'll take it." The meeting time came and I went off the taxi in front of this 22-story building. The lobby was already finished in floors of black marble and roof in white marble with diffuse white lighting. Round, double-height columns in stainless steel. As I entered, something calls my attention. There are scratches on the floor. Oh, also in the columns. Fuck. Also in the doors. This is bad. These are telltale signs of horrible construction management. I take the stairs to the 4th floor, and the construction auditor, Phil, receives me. He's a large guy with a short beard and stern but amicable face. So, Yuan needs more bokeh. What happened to Ray? Hi, yes, he sent me in his place. Well, we're about to start. Just sit by my side and don't intervene unless it is necessary. Anything I need to know? I ask. He smiles me back with a grin. Just wait and enjoy. So we enter this large improvised meeting room. There is electricity, but the floor is still bare concrete and the doors are temporary. The table is enough for maybe 20 people. On the corner, there is a small guy with a curved back and sketchy appearance. He could be described as a weasel in office attire. No one pays any attention to my presence as everyone is taking seats. I sit beside Phil, near the middle of the table. The weasel on the far head, and the closest head is still empty. That guy is the construction manager. He is blaming us for the screw-up, he says, pointing at the weasel. We wait for maybe 5 minutes with only a rumor of small conversations in the place. Finally, the door opens up, and a peacock-like office Chad enters. Black trousers, white and pink vertically striped shirt, and big golden sunglasses where a helmet should have been. A large golden watch, kettlebell-sized, completed the image. Sorry I'm late, let's begin the meeting, Chad announces. I assume for his commanding tone that he is the representative of the owners. After some minimal greeting to all the people in the room by the architect, he gives the word to Chad. I take a glance at Phil. He is expectant. Now, Chad raises from the table, points to the weasel, and the party starts. Explain to me how the frick you forgot to build doors for the elevator machine room. We are already delayed a month. You made a fudging mess in the lobby, and now we have to demolish a wall so the elevator people can enter. Okay, sir, the weasel answered. First of all, these changes have been asked by you. You asked for the lobby to be left ready while I still have to work with people there, and you have it fully scratched. How the frick is that my responsibility? Turns out Chad and the weasel were not only severely unprofessional, but also hated each other with such passion that they had to be put in opposite sides of the table, because more than once they went too close to a fist fight. They discussed screaming at each other for maybe 5 minutes. Chad is fully aggressive and red, attacking relentlessly. The manager, just as his appearance suggests, sneaks in between all the attacks and deflects responsibilities, blaming everything under the sun. The rest of the assistants are just expecting to let time pass quickly and leave, but Phil is happy. He was one step away from having some popcorn. I lean to him and whisper, "So they forgot an access for the machine room?" Not only that, but the weasel also declared some construction molds as stolen, and they made an investigation. Turns out they are still inside that closed room. What? I asked a bit louder. Hey kid, Chad addresses me despectively. Shut up. And goes back to the fight. After some more punches back and forth, the weasel is running out from ways to deflect his mistake. He tries one more. But this wasn't our fault. The door was not in the structural engineer's drawings. He forms a smug smile. Plus, Ray didn't even come to the meeting. If any penalties are to be applied, it is to them for their incompetence. Boy, that was my cue. I clear my throat, but fail in the first impression, entering in a timid way. Well, shut up kid, the weasel snaps, and looks to Phil. Phil, keep your assistant quiet. I decide to make me understand more clearly. I pulled a set of schematics, letting them fall heavily over the table and catching the attention of both Chad and the weasel. Over the schematics, I put my construction helmet, with the logo of the engineering firm. Silence takes the place. If I may, I now speak in front of a pale weasel and a Chad who internally debates if showing shame for calling me kid or do a victory lap around the weasel. I'm actually a structural engineer from company, and Ray sent me in his representation because his schedule was full. Mind if we check what appears on the drawings? Here we are. Yes, as you can see the door is here, and I think this cannot be attributed to confusion from structural design. I agree, Phil comments with a huge smile. The rest of the table is trying to hide their amusement. I continue. So that settles it. I can make here a procedure for the demolition and installation of the access, or if you prefer, I can send it approved by Ray tomorrow. Everyone is silent, in a second of contained storm, but Phil isn't done yet. He leans in and puts his hands over the table. Now, we need to see what we will do to recover the supposedly stolen equipment that is still trapped inside the machine room. And what will you do about the 2 workers that you fired this morning? He looks to the weasel, who is just about to melt and escape by first crack he can find. Chad now turns into a raging volcano. He was so furious that his blood pressure could have been measured in atmospheres. You fired people without proof? And then another 5 minutes of berating exploded until the architect, who was supposed to be coordinating the meeting, called to a truce so they could advance with the problem of the electric and water crews. Phil and I were dismissed, but while the door was closing, I could hear Chad screaming again. I sighed, relieved. Truth is, I was shaking a little. What a mess. Nah, this was a quiet meeting, Phil said, smiling. Tell Ray he missed a good one. Pleased to meet you, kid. In the end, the construction was finished with 5 months of delay. Both the Weasel and Chad were fired from their respective companies. Ray just laughed at my story and told me it was good that Chad hadn't tried to punch me because he wanted to fight everyone all the time. I never found those 2 again, but I found Phil on another project 2 years after. Same mischievous old man. To my luck, to this day, I never had another meeting like that dreadful one. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed that one today. Tell me what you thought of these r/IDoWorkHereLady stories. I'm just trying to cover a big spread of different subreddits, 5 videos a day if I can get them out. Sometimes I can, sometimes I can't. Tell me what you think of all this today. Tell me what you like about the content. I'm loving just putting it out, not gonna lie. Hope you guys have a good day, night, sleep, whatever you're up to, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!